Have you ever noticed how some people hold sway without uttering a single plea? They don't chase you, don't grovel, they simply step back, and suddenly everyone rushes to reclaim their attention. It's not some mystical trick, it's the quiet authority of withdrawal, and most of us never learn to wield it. This isn't about manipulation for its own sake, it's about embracing a core principle of human psychology. Scarcity breeds value. When you're forever on, always replying, always fixing, always pouring yourself out, your presence becomes background noise, expected rather than treasured. But the instant you pause, stop answering every call, stop justifying every feeling, stop emptying your tank, you force a recalibration. People who barely noticed you feel the vacuum. Those who leaned on you begin to wonder, have I overstepped? The very energy you once gifted without question now must be earned. Think of that split second before you hit send, that breath between insult and comeback. It carries more potency than any clever retort. In that pregnant silence, the conversation pivots, not because you punished anyone, but because you reclaimed your power. Silence isn't weakness, it's a room-turning weapon. It starves the old cycle of your perpetual availability and invites them to step up. Imagine you're in a group chat where you've always been the first to type. One day, you simply don't. No, sorry, busy, just unread. Notice the ripple. Messages double sent, emojis checked. You there? You don't need a thesis to defend your absence. Your quiet says it all. I'm not at your beck and call. Here's the unspoken transaction in every bond you've ever had. It's not only about emotional connection, it's about access. People weren't just relating to you, they were exploiting your predictability, drawing on your reflexive empathy and your need to explain. Break that pattern. The instant they can't tap into your automatic response, they lose their grip. So next time you feel the urge to justify or to rush back into their orbit, pause, breathe. Let your silence become your statement. You'll watch relationships rebalance, respect, recalibrate, and most importantly, you'll discover the rarest power of all, letting absence speak louder than any words ever could. You're the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who jumps in to soothe every upset, only to explode in frustration later and apologize just to keep the calm. You tell yourself, I'm just being me. But ask yourself, which version of you? The one you perform to keep the relationship on an even keel. Here's the truth. They're not bonding with the real you. They're bonding with predictable patterns you've trained into the dynamic. They know exactly which button to push to get a reaction. Your guilt-driven compliance, your habit of cracking a joke to dodge the hard truths. That's not intimacy, it's programming. And the more reliably you fall into line, the more control you hand away. Emotional availability, left unchecked, becomes their leverage, often unconsciously wielded, but leverage all the same. Now imagine they set the bait, and this time you don't bite. No defense, no rush to calm the waters. You simply stay silent. Watch them panic as their carefully choreographed script collapses. In that pregnant pause, you reclaim your power. Because they weren't truly relying on your love, they were spending your reactions like currency. The moment you stop reacting, your worth shifts. Not in their eyes, but in yours. They don't fear your anger, they fear your neutrality. They don't fear your voice, they fear the quiet where their power used to dwell. And when you refuse to play the role they cast you in, they find themselves face to face with an unexpected stranger, the real you. Let's be frank, most people don't respect your time. They respect your availability, your on-demand usefulness, but your time, that sacred, non-renewable resource, they treat it like a subscription service, and you've been auto-renewing every yes, without once checking your balance. Here's the deeper truth. Your time is your soul's currency. Every minute you dump into someone else's chaos, instead of aligning with your own path, you bankrupt your inner life in ways no one else will notice. So you cancel your evening of rest, skip the bath and the book, and pick up the phone again. Because you've been taught that your worth depends on always being there. Isn't it time to stop the auto-renewal? You drain yourself for them, and when it's over, they feel lighter, while you're left running on a lower frequency. Here's the thing. Your body is pure energy. Every thought, every feeling, every boundary you draw or fail to draw sends out a vibrational signal. High frequencies are joy, clarity, self-respect. Low frequencies are guilt, resentment, depletion. Every time you force a yes that your soul never really agreed to, you aren't just bending your spirit. You're literally tuning your energy field into someone else's chaotic wavelength. Over and over, you broadcast that boundaryless, ever-available version of yourself. And guess what? You magnetize people who expect exactly that. They don't even notice they're drawn in. They simply sync with the frequency you continually emit. But here's the spiritual pitfall. You begin to believe that exhaustion equals love, that erasing your own needs is kindness, that martyrdom is some moral badge of honor. It's not. Each coerced concession fractures your inner alignment, and misalignment, left unchecked, becomes a chronic disease, emotionally, mentally, physically. That's burnout, the hollow, numb sensation of living a life that isn't yours. And still, in our culture, folks will never ask what it cost you to show up. They just assume you had more to give. They feel entitled to your time without honoring it. So here's your reminder. You owe no one a permission slip to protect your energy. You don't need to justify why you guard your peace. You weren't born to be on emotional call 24/7. You were born to tune into your own soul's resonance. And the heaviest truth? Your time here is finite. You can't add seconds by people-pleasing. Every hour spent resentful is an hour you can't reclaim. This isn't about maybe later. It's about now. So ask yourself, who are you holding on to, and at what cost to your own essence? What part of you are you sacrificing in the scramble to be there for someone else? And what if for once you stopped worrying, will they love me if I say no, and started wondering, will I still love myself if I don't? What if you began asking yourself, will I still honor my own worth if I keep saying yes? Because your spirit wasn't sent here to be drained. It was sent here to grow. And you don't flourish by shrinking. You flourish by tuning into the frequency of your own truth, no matter how rattling that may feel to others. Let them adapt, or let them go. You have one life to live, and it deserves to feel like yours. Being perpetually available is the subtlest form of self-neglect. When people adore what you do more than who you are, they mistake your utility for intimacy. You step in, you soften their storms, you piece things back together, and for a fleeting moment, it seems like real connection. But beneath that exchange, something more unsettling is at work. They're not valuing you, they're valuing your function. And if you've been the fixer for so long, no one ever bothered to ask what you needed, maybe you stopped noticing yourself too. At first, this masquerade feels like love. It echoes with thank yous, hums with gratitude, dances like trust. But it's not love at all. It's dependency. And the longer you cast yourself in the role of rescuer, the more people forget you have your own wounds. Wounds you never voiced because your worth became entangled with your silence. Let's be honest. You became seen as indispensable because you convinced yourself you weren't lovable unless you were needed. Carl Jung would call this a collapse of self into persona, a survival-born mask worn to navigate expectations. It wasn't an act of malice, but a strategy of safety. When vulnerability was met with dismissal and your genuine voice felt too jarring to welcome, you traded authenticity for compliance. You offered competence, loyalty, endless availability. And over time, that mask stopped being a tool and became a cage. You weren't responding anymore. You were reciting lines. You weren't bonding. You were maintaining your role. You clung to relevance and place in people's lives. People who only saw you as long as you filled their needs. Now look around. Where does your usefulness end and your own identity begin? And here's the truth. No one whispers aloud. When affection is braided with utility, silence becomes radioactive. Rest is rebellion. When you're not constantly proving your worth through output and service, you feel exposed because you've been running from a question that terrifies you. If you stop performing, what's left? Underneath every act of doing is a soul whispering, "I'm scared of being forgotten. I'm terrified of being just ordinary." But you don't have to stay hidden behind your endless giving. You can choose to live from a place of inner abundance rather than outer approval. You can reclaim your time, your boundaries, your energy, because the only true leverage you ever had is your own sovereignty. So let the mask fall. Let the silence ring. Allow the space for your real self to step forward. That's where real power lives, not in endless doing, but in unwavering being. What happens when you finally pull back and the calls stop coming? When people drift, ironically because you feared loss. Here's the cruel twist. By giving endlessly to prevent that drift, you ensure it. The more you teach others to value your deeds over your being, the more your true self fades into the background. Think of your energy as a field of light. Every act of emotional labor, every shoulder you offer, every midnight call you answer thins that field. You become a beacon for others, but vanish to yourself. You parcel out your bandwidth in fragments. One, "I'm here" text here, one, "tell me what's wrong" there, until your own signal flickers and destabilizes. It's not that you stop existing, it's that you become impossible to locate in your own life. When usefulness becomes your currency, you spend until there's nothing left for your own needs. And one day, you look up. You're surrounded by faces, yet painfully alone. Not because they failed you, but because they learned to love your mask, not the real you. Yes, you were generous, but generosity born of fear. Fear of disappointing, fear of appearing ordinary, never felt like love, only self-abandonment. Carl Jung would say that the more you over-identify with your persona, the louder your shadow grows. Those parts of you you buried, anger, bitterness, exhaustion, aren't gone. They gather strength underground. Eventually they surface, not to punish, but to ask, what remains of you if you stop performing? You are not inexhaustible. Pretending otherwise is a slow erosion of your soul. You deserve to be loved for your quiet moments, your no, your uncluttered silence, your very absence. The ones who only show up for the you who fixes their chaos are not your people. The ones who stay when you rest, those are the ones who truly see you, who make love feel safe again. So here's the invitation. Remove the mask. Withdraw the performance. Notice who stays not to punish you, but to protect what's left, the parts of you that never needed earning in the first place. You are not here to be anyone's utility, to be on call for emotional repairs, or to prove your worth over and over. You're here to be yourself, and that alone is enough. You're here to exist fully, imperfectly, unapologetically. And the people who can hold that reality aren't unsettled when you finally stop performing for them. They're relieved when you simply are. True connection isn't built on your output, but on your presence. Yet, when you finally drop the act, Your power doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. It leaks away in unnoticed ways, snapped nerves, petty squabbles, impulsive retorts that feel almost justified. You'll find yourself locked in an online debate at dawn over something you barely care about. You'll draft paragraphs nobody asked for, replaying the same confrontation on loop until your chest tightens and your mind buzzes with static. Why? Because every time you react on autopilot, you're bleeding your energy dry. Carl Jung saw this coming long before the internet turned our every thought into a performance. He understood the psyche not as a filing cabinet of ideas, but as a living current, an energetic field that must be managed. When you erupt without pause, you siphon power away from your true center and feed the noise instead of the signal. You're left wondering why, even winning, you feel so empty afterward. It's because the effort wasn't an investment, it was an emotional expense with zero return. Reacting doesn't make you powerful. Choosing when and whether to engage does. Think of your feelings as currency. Every impulse is a purchase. Are you buying something that lasts, or just indulging a craving for instant approval? Emotional discipline isn't cold or robotic, it's stewardship. It's refusing to let unearned demands hijack your nervous system. It's walking away from setups designed to spark drama, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've realized they'll never truly hear you. Silence in the face of provocation isn't defeat, it's power. It says, "This moment doesn't own me." It preserves your energy for what truly matters, the conversations worth having, the people who genuinely want your presence, and the life you still have to build. Not every challenge deserves your energy. Some conversations are ambushes in disguise, traps that feed on whatever spark you bring into them. Refusing to react isn't about burying your truth. It's about choosing its highest form. Feel everything, but share only what serves your growth. Not every feeling needs an audience. Some belong to your own silent witnessing. That's true psychic sovereignty, trusting your inner compass, not begging the world for validation. But we live in an attention economy that feeds on your emotional currency. Every time you react, whether to algorithms, ideologies, or the unhealed people around you, you're depositing energy into someone else's ledger. To reclaim your power, you must break the cycle. Become strategic about where you invest your spirit. Audit your triggers. Withhold your spark from the voids that only want to burn it. Imagine the split second after you're provoked. Your heart races, blood rushes, your jaw tightens. Ancient memory wired into your body demanding you defend, explode, or vanish. That surge isn't weakness, it's history. The frightened child you once were, convinced that silence meant erasure. But if you pause, just long enough to breathe, you realize the moment you braced for attack is a lesson, not a sentence. The real threat wasn't the person in front of you, it was the old wound they grazed. When you learn to meet that flare of emotion without yielding to it, you stop empowering your past. You see the trigger for what it is, a teacher pointing out the one place you still let go of your power. And in resisting the gravitational pull of reflex, you begin to transmute raw reactivity into conscious choice. Your evolution depends on defending that space between stimulus and response. Because in that space, you reclaim your authority, redirect your force, and finally become the author of your own emotional destiny. You're not facing an outside enemy. It's that unacknowledged vulnerability inside you. Jung insisted real self-realization demands a fearless meeting with your shadow, the part of your psyche buried beneath your social mask. Those moments when you flare up or shut down, they're not failures. They're signals that something vital has been exiled and needs to come back home. True mastery isn't about never reacting. It's about noticing the flare of anger, shame, or fear rising in your chest and refusing to become it. When someone insults you and every fiber of your being wants to strike back, you breathe instead. You observe the heat in your face, the tightening in your gut, and you hold that charge without unleashing it. In that stillness, you step out of the spell of automatic response. You move from survival reflex to sovereign choice. This is the razor's edge between reactivity and true power. Reflex is slavery to old wounds. Response is self-possession. Yes, it's excruciating to lean into the very feelings you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Abandonment, betrayal, worthlessness. But the moment you sit with those ghosts, you rob them of their authority. You become the witness, the container, the presence that holds the storm without shattering. And what do you reclaim? The one thing no outside validation can ever give you: choice. Choice to speak with intention or not at all. Choice to stand firm rather than be bulldozed. Choice to act in alignment with your deepest truth instead of succumbing to every trigger. Because feeling triggered is human, it will happen. But letting that trigger steer your life is optional. The real work isn't dodging conflict or pretending you've moved on. It's practicing radical presence in the very moment you want to collapse. You don't have to wage every battle from your past. You don't have to persuade the closed-minded or mirror their fury. Instead, you learn to hold your center, and from that place you reclaim the wheel of your own destiny. Imagine in the next heated moment you do absolutely nothing, no rebuttal, no performance, just a calm stillness that radiates. I see my truth and nothing you say can unsettle it. Real power isn't a shout. It's a quiet confidence that weathered storms can't shake. In that silence, you discover the trigger no longer holds sway. You do. This is not denial, it's your evolution. To really test your freedom, don't judge yourself by how you sail calm seas. Judge yourself by how you stand when the waves crash hardest. Sovereignty isn't built on flawless composure. It's forged in the heat of provocation, in the breath you draw when you could lash out, in the silence you cling to when you could overpower. That moment of inner stillness, when every instinct screams to break, is where you truly meet yourself and reclaim your power. Notice how, for so long, people mistook your responsiveness for your identity. They never saw you. They saw a projection, an image tailored to soothe their fears, to fit neatly into their stories. You became their fixer, their calm in the storm, the dependable one who never rocked the boat. But that was never love. That was you performing worth, a role shaped by their needs, not your soul. And now, imagine shifting. In that same moment, you simply get still instead of soothing. You find the strength to say no where you once caved. You replace accommodation with the quiet assertion of boundaries. Watch how the dynamic twists. Watch how projections unravel when there's no reactive fuel left. In that vacuum, you stop being their puppet and start being yourself. This is your rebirth. The archetype they cast you in falls away, and in its place stands the fully realized you, steady, true, unapologetic. When you stop chasing the persona they crave, they no longer know what to expect. And that's the most telling sign. You've stopped serving their script and stepped onto your own stage. Have you noticed how, the moment you refuse to play your usual part, everything shifts? You stop being the safe choice, the comfortable fixture, and suddenly your absence feels like an earthquake to them. That's because their sense of security was never built on genuine connection, but on your predictable compliance. Jung called this unconscious projection. People unconsciously cast their unmet needs, shame, and fantasies onto you. When you fit perfectly into that projected role, they mistook it for love. But love liberates, while projection demands obedience. Think about it. For years you were lauded whenever you bent to their will, praised when you swallowed your own needs, rewarded for silence. But the instant you pull back, reclaim your time, your energy, your right to say no, you're labeled selfish, accused of changing, or brusquely dismissed. Why? Because you threatened the delicate balance of control. You showed them the relationship wasn't mutual, but conditional, entirely contingent on your continuing to perform that scripted role. Most people, terrified of losing even a false sense of belonging, fold right back into character. But there comes a moment, often after one too many sleepless nights, when you realize that sustaining that performance costs more than you can bear. And so you step off the stage. In that moment, the mask slips. You become unrecognizable to those who only ever loved the idea of you. Yes, some will walk away, but watch what happens then. Their projections wither. The manipulative dynamic collapses because manipulation lives on predictability and your silent consent. Once you stop feeding the cycle, you become delightfully unpredictable, not in chaotic outbursts, but in the steady sovereignty of someone who answers only to themselves. You no longer fit their old script. You are free. They were never really seeing you, only a character they'd cast. But that confusion, it's a gift. It means you're shedding the role and stepping into your full, multidimensional self. This isn't rebellion, it's reclamation. You're not here to be misread, you're here to be witnessed. Those who can't will drift away because they never connected to you in the first place, only to their own projections. So let the masks fall. Let the applause die down. That version of you, molded for everyone else's comfort, can finally dissolve. In its place, let something quieter, truer, and far more powerful rise. The you who refuses to erase yourself, who'd rather live real than revered, who no longer fears being misunderstood. Chosen silence isn't retreat. It's a fierce reclamation of your own space. Jung reminded us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But he also warned that not every spark needs fuel. Some conflicts are traps designed to provoke your reactive self, not your growth. When someone criticizes or distorts you, they're not talking to your true self. They're talking to their own shadow. If you react on their terms, you only reinforce the role they cast you in. Silence shatters that loop. It isn't weakness or avoidance. It's psychological mastery. It's individuation in action, the process of becoming whole, as Jung called it. You step out of the roles imposed on you and resist collapsing back into scripted reactions. Yes, your stillness may be misread as aloofness or coldness, but misunderstandings are part of the pattern you're dismantling. You're not here to soothe their discomfort. You're here to honor your own clarity. True strength often hides in the pause between stimulus and response. In that space, you see so much more. Their unspoken motives, your own habitual urges, the truth of the moment. If you can stay there, steady, present, unshaken, you reclaim your power not by shouting louder, but by simply being. That lucid silence is the heartbeat of your emergence. When you rush to fill the space with words, you lose the hidden architecture of the moment, the flicker in their eyes, the half-spoken thought, the mismatch between gesture and intention. And above all, you miss your own reflexive patterns. In that unbroken silence, you step back from the fray and suddenly see the full tableau. The subtle power plays behind polite smiles, the apology that masks a test, the concern that really contains control. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the fierce work of disentangling your awareness from every projection cast upon you, of separating your true essence from the role you learn to perform. When you're constantly verbalizing, especially under emotional charge, you're rarely speaking from presence. You're echoing old conditioning, childhood scripts, trauma reflexes, someone else's archetype. But silence bursts that script. It transforms you from actor into witness, and witnessing is the first act of liberation. To observe is to reclaim the energy you once poured into managing other people's narratives. It's to rise above the emotional transaction and ask, what is really happening here? There is always a deeper dynamic, a truth lurking in plain sight, if only you stay quiet long enough to see it. In that stillness, you even become aware of your own body's stories. The quickening of your pulse, the knot in your gut, the impulse to explain. You realize how often you've used your voice to defend a boundary that presence alone could hold. And paradoxically, the less you say, the more clearly you and they are seen. Choosing observation over reaction is choosing your own rhythm. It's sovereignty, no longer compelled to interrupt falsehood, but letting it unravel itself. In your calm silence, others reveal themselves, their strategies, their unguarded slips. And you too discover hidden things, your habitual tics, your people-pleasing reflex, the deep fears you've never voiced. This is the power of lucid silence, not an absence of voice, but the emergence of your truest one. Have you noticed how, in heated moments, words can feel like chains? When you rush to speak, you clip the wings of the conversation's subtle currents. That tiny catch of breath, the micro-expression that almost passed across a face, the slight stiffening of a shoulder. These are the true signals, and they vanish the moment you dive in to fill the space. Worse, your own knee-jerk reactions, the old scripts from childhood, the survival reflexes born in pain, seize the stage, and you become an actor playing a role, not a person living a moment. Silence, however, is a scalpel. It severs you from those rehearsed lines and turns you into an observer. In that stillness, you see the real choreography, the polite smile that skirts a challenge, the "I'm sorry" that is actually a test of your boundaries, the caring question that masks an attempt to manipulate. Jung called this process individuation, the courageous disentangling of your true self from the projections others have imposed on you. It's the journey from performance to presence. When you speak under emotional duress, you're rarely rooted in what's happening now. You're echoing someone else's script, perhaps your mother's voice, perhaps the voice of a cruel teacher, any inherited program that hijacked your authenticity. But hold that breath. Let the silence expand around you. In resisting the urge to react, you reclaim the energy you once spent policing other people's stories. You rise above the emotional tug-of-war and ask quietly, what is actually unfolding here? And in that question lies revelation. Suddenly, you're aware of your own body's language, the flicker of heat in your cheeks, the tightening of your chest, the clammy instinct to explain yourself. You realize you didn't need words to defend your boundary. Presence alone could have held the line. Paradoxically, the less you speak, the more luminous your presence becomes. You and they are seen with new clarity. Choosing observation over reaction establishes your own tempo. This is sovereignty. You're no longer compelled to plug every silence with defense or flattery. Instead, you let false narratives unravel on their own. In your calm stillness, others slip, revealing the strategies they'd wrapped in charm. And you unearth your own invisible habits, the people-pleasing reflex, the self-erase impulse, the hidden fear you never dared name. This is the essence of lucid silence. It isn't an absence of voice, but the birthplace of your truest one. In the hush between impulse and action, you claim the space to decide whether to speak, and if you do, what worth your words should carry. That breath, that pause, becomes your most potent statement. Here I stand, no longer a puppet to my past or to another's design. So, the next time tension rises, resist the impulse to fill the void. Let the silence speak. Watch the patterns reveal themselves. Feel the power you've quietly reclaimed. In that sacred stillness, your real self emerges, and with it, the freedom to live by your own rhythm, not by someone else's script. You've noticed it, haven't you? How you bend your will just to be heard. How you spill your secrets for an ear that never truly listens. How you walk away from those conversations feeling hollow, as if you've traded your life force for empty acknowledgement. Here's the pivot point. Speak less to those who dismiss you. Speak deeply to those who earn your words. Let your silence be the sieve that filters out the noise. Let your very presence carry the weight of the unsaid. Because when you stop handing your voice to people who never deserved it, you don't harden, you deepen. You learn to speak with the authority of someone who knows every word matters. Understanding your patterns isn't the same as breaking them. Awareness without action is just another distraction. You can read all the books, journal all the insights, and remain stuck in the same emotionally bankrupt loops. Real change demands courage, feeling the tremor of fear and still uttering your no. Letting the phone ring unanswered, refusing to justify decisions to ears that have never been tuned to your frequency. Jung taught that transformation sparks at the crossroads of insight and responsibility, that moment when theory ignites practice. It's not enough to recognize that people-pleasing is a survival reflex. You must live through the discomfort of dismantling it. Every time you choose presence over performance, silence over apology, you're not just changing behavior, you're re-establishing your self-respect. This isn't about perfection, it's about practice. Your truth isn't a concept to debate, it's a life to embody. So ask yourself, am I performing the safe script, or am I living my truth? Reflection. Without change is its own prison. Clarity without new habits is merely a gilded cage. Start small, say no once. Let your silence do the heavy lifting. Let your peace be your loudest statement. That's when healing stops being an idea and becomes your chosen path. I know solitude can feel like abandonment, especially when you've long measured your worth by how many people you please. We've been taught that being alone equals failure. But what if solitude isn't punishment, but permission? What if stepping back is the first step toward coming home to yourself? There comes a time when the performance exhausts you, when every yes feels like a betrayal, when you realize you've forgotten what it feels like to simply be you, unscripted and unseen. That is the moment to reclaim your voice, to rediscover yourself, to let silence guide you back to the life that's always been waiting beneath the noise. Have you felt it too? That sinking ache after you've poured your heart out for an audience that wasn't listening, only polite nods and polite neglect in return. You leave the conversation drained, as if your very vitality was the price of their indifference. Here's the turning point. Speak less to the people who treat your words like free samples. Speak fully to those who've earned your trust. Let your silence sift through the chatter, revealing only what's essential. When you stop giving your voice away as if it were disposable, you don't become cold, you become magnetic. Your words land with gravity, because they're no longer on constant tap. Knowing your own patterns won't break them. Insight without commitment is just another mental treadmill. You can collect every aha moment in a journal and never budge an inch. True transformation is forged in the crucible of discomfort, that quiver in your chest before you say no, that steadiness in your breath when the phone rings and you don't answer. It's the resolve to stop explaining yourself to people who never really hear. Jung taught that growth ignites where awareness collides with action. Recognizing people-pleasing as a knee-jerk reflex is only step one. You must then step into the fear and refuse to comply. With each choice to hold your ground, you rebuild the fortress of your self-respect. Perfection's a myth. Practice is everything. Your truth isn't something to articulate in theory. It's something you live. So ask yourself, am I reciting a familiar script, or am I authoring my own story? Reflection without change is a gilded cage. Clarity without new habits is just another form of self-betrayal. Begin small. Let one no echo. Allow your stillness to carry the message. Let your peace be your loudest proclamation. That's when healing shifts from an idea to your lived reality. Yes, solitude can feel like exile when you've long defined yourself by your availability. But what if stepping away is permission to return to yourself? There comes a moment when the performance suffocates you, When every yes feels like another fracture, that's your signal to step off the stage, reclaim your voice, and let silence guide you home to the person you've been beneath all the noise. Do you know that hollow stillness you feel when you spill your feelings, and all you get back is a distracted nod? That moment you step away from the chat, shoulders heavy, as if your emotion was the currency they spent without care. Here's the breakthrough. Stop giving your voice to those who treat it like background noise. Reserve it for the circle that actually leans in. Let your silence become the filter through which only the essential passes. When you stop broadcasting yourself on demand, your words gain weight. They're no longer always on, but savored when they do arrive. Merely spotting your own habits won't change them. Insight without action is just another loop in your head. You can journal every realization and still wake up trapped in the same old patterns. Real change demands leaning into the discomfort, the tremor in your throat before you dare to say no, the calm inhale when you leave that call unanswered. It's the commitment to cease explaining yourself to ears that never truly listen. Jung taught that the spark of growth ignites where knowing meets doing. Acknowledging your people-pleasing reflex is only the first step. You must then meet your fear and stand firm. Every time you choose your dignity over appeasement, you rebuild your inner citadel. Perfection is a myth. Practice is your path. Your truth isn't an essay to compose, it's a life to embody. So ask yourself, am I replaying the old script, or am I writing my own scenes? Self-awareness without new choices is its own cage. Enlightenment without evolving is self-sabotage. Start with one small boundary. Let that no resonate. Trust your stillness to speak volumes. Let your peace be the loudest statement you make. That's the moment when healing truly begins, as a lived experience, not just a concept. Yes, solitude can sting when you've long defined yourself by your availability. But what if stepping back is the first step forward to rediscover the self you left behind in the chaos? There comes a time when every yes feels like a crack in your foundation. That's your signal to take your bow, reclaim your voice, and allow silence to guide you home to the person you were before the world demanded your performance. Jung called this journey individuation, the slow unfolding of the self beyond every mask the world forced you to wear. It's not about becoming a shinier version of yourself. It's about remembering who you always were underneath all the noise. This reclaimed self moves without asking permission. It doesn't shrink to fit a room that can't hold its truth. It understands that solitude isn't exile. It's the laboratory of your rebirth. It knows boundaries aren't walls. They're the birth canals of a truer identity. Yes, there will be grief. Grief for all the roles you performed, the smallness you adopted to keep the peace, the years you spent negotiating your worth. But when that grief dissolves, what emerges is sacred, a you rooted in wholeness, not in others' approval. You stop merely coping and begin creating. You stop begging for scraps of attention and start attracting energies aligned with your essence. You stop explaining your existence and simply live it. And those who resonate with your frequency converge around you, drawn by a signal no longer hidden. Transformation isn't always fireworks. Often, it's the hushed release of, "I refuse to stay small." It's the quiet faith that space vacated by self-betrayal will fill with something true, and it will. Because when you cease pouring your energy into the wrong places, you reclaim it for healing, for clarity, for a life that actually fits. This is the you were always meant to meet. No better, just real. If you're done shrinking, done explaining, done settling, let this be your first step home. And if you're walking this path with me, subscribe here so you don't miss what comes next. Drop "I choose me" in the comments if you're ready to trade old patterns for presence, to speak and act from wholeness, not from history. When you're ready to go deeper, the next video awaits. Protect your energy. Honor your truth. Move through the world as if you've already come home. Until next time.